Every day was the same. During recess, when the students ran through the hallways, opened their colorful snacks, and occupied the cafeteria tables with loud laughter, Livia would go to the same place, the corner of the courtyard, near the back ramp, where the sun was less shining and almost no one sat down. There, with her body hunched over and her faded backpack on her lap, she did what she could to go unnoticed. Livia was small, thinner than normal, and her eyes carried a tiredness that didn't match her age. Her hair was almost always tied up with a rubber band, and her uniform, although clean, betrayed the age. The fabric had already faded, the collar was frayed, and the seams on the sleeves had been mended by hand. But that wasn't what drew the most attention. It was the silence. Livia didn't say much, almost nothing. He responded with nods or short words. She never participated in the games, never got in line for lunch in the cafeteria. She preferred to take whatever she had out of her backpack and sit far away. The other students noticed, of course, some with indifference, others with curiosity, but there were those who turned this difference into a target, like Julia, for example, the girl with the pink thermal lunchbox, always with imported juice and heart-shaped cookies, or Kaio, the jokester of the class who never missed a chance to make fun of anyone who was different. "Come on, Kaio. Ask what's in the beggar's lunchbox today." Some laughed, but Livia never reacted. She just looked down, slowly opened her backpack, and ate what she brought with her carefully, as if everything inside was too precious to be exposed. For many, she was just the strange girl in the lunchroom, but no one really knew what that poor girl was carrying inside her backpack, and no one imagined that soon the entire school would go silent because of it. Livia's backpack seemed to carry more than just books. It was too big for her small body, faded by time, and had a hand-sewn strap that was about to come loose. There were clay stains on the side and a zipper that got stuck every time someone pulled hard. For many, it was just another sign of poverty. For her, it was a shield. No one knew what was inside. Some said she was carrying old clothes, others swore they had seen cans of food inside. Julia once told the class that the backpack smelled of mold, which drew laughter, even from those who claimed to be neutral. But Livia, once again, didn't answer. In fact, she clung to that backpack as if it were a safe. Every little pocket was strategic. Every fold had a purpose. Inside it was not only food, but stories, survival, memories, secrets. On one particular day that week, the playground had a different atmosphere. It was Friday, the day when students could bring something from home for a group snack. Everyone was excited. Cakes, snacks, little bottles of juice with names in English. The school was full of smells and colors, and as always, Livia sat in the corner. But something changed that day. It took her a while to open her backpack. Her hands trembled on the zipper, looking around. I was more nervous than usual. Mariana, who was also sitting alone, noticed but preferred not to interfere. Julia, on the other hand, wasted no time. "I bet she brought stale bread again today," she said loudly, already drawing attention. Livia looked down. She took a deep breath, and for the first time she hesitated to open her backpack. But time was short, and her siblings were waiting. She carefully pulled the zipper, revealing something wrapped in a thin cloth. It was then that Kaio approached from behind and, without warning, tried to pull the backpack from her hands. "Hey!" she shouted instinctively, her eyes wide. It was the first time he had raised his voice at school. Everyone stopped. Everyone looked. And the next scene would be the beginning of everything. The courtyard, which had been noisy and full of conversations until then, fell into a brief silence when Livia's scream echoed. It wasn't a loud scream, but it carried something rare, a mixture of fear and strength. Kaio took a step back, surprised. He had simply pulled the backpack as if he were ripping a toy from a child. But for Livia, that was more than a pull. It was an invasion. It was old pain being touched without permission. The backpack fell to the ground. From inside it, he slowly slid the white cloth that wrapped the snack. The cloth opened a little, revealing a dry bread, cut in half with almost melted margarine and 3 broken cookies in a reused bag. Next to it, a darkened banana and a small napkin handwritten in blue pen. "Thanks for sharing. Grandma loves you." Kaio didn't understand. Julia, who was already approaching, saw the scene and wrinkled her nose. "Guys, is that what she eats? For pity's sake," she said, putting her hand over her mouth as if she were going to vomit. "That looks like garbage food." The laughter came in waves. First 2, then 5, then almost all the students around. The laughter mixed with disgust, mockery, and that old collective cruelty that comes from the comfort of not being the target. Livia, kneeling, carefully picked up the pieces. With steady hands, she put everything back in her backpack. But her eyes were watering, not from shame, but from contained anger. "Take this. Go, before it attracts a rat," Caio said, laughing loudly and pushing the banana with his foot. That was when Mariana, sitting a few meters away, stood up. She didn't say anything. She just walked over to the backpack, bent down, and, in silence, helped Livia collect the crumbs and fold the cloth. Mariana's hand touched hers, and in that gesture, there was something stronger than 1,000 words. But no one saw it, because the focus was still on the laughter. Caio took out his cell phone and started filming. "Pay attention, everyone. The Dump Queen snack," and recorded the scene of Livia bent down holding the bread and the fallen backpack. But at that moment, without knowing it, he was filming the beginning of his own lesson. Because what was in that backpack wasn't just stale bread. It was a story. It was a reason. It was a daily miracle that no one could imagine. And soon, the laughter would turn into silence. The video spread around the school faster than any rumor ever told there. In less than 10 minutes, the video posted by Caio was already in the class group, in the 8th grade group, and even in the group of some parents, sent by children laughing at the poor girl's snack. The scene was clear. Livia kneeling, carefully putting away the piece of dry bread, with the mashed banana next to her and the napkin with handwriting on it. Caio's voice mocking in the background, Julia's laughter, the indifference of those filming. A show of public cruelty. But for some, that video didn't make them laugh. It made them feel like they had a lump in their throat. Among them was teacher Camila, who taught another class but was known for her watchful eye. She saw the video during recess, on a classmate's cell phone, and she didn't laugh. She just narrowed her eyes and said, "There's something wrong here. No one protects a loaf of bread like that, if it's not all they have." Meanwhile, in the classroom, Livia remained silent. She came back from the humiliation of recess with her eyes lowered and her lips sealed. She sat down at her desk, as she always did, and took out her notebook with the cover folded. She began to copy the contents of the board as if nothing had happened. But there was something different about her posture. She wasn't shaking anymore. Mariana watched from afar. She saw the note that Livia was still holding with her fingertips, the same one from the backpack. "Thank you for sharing. Grandma loves you." Simple, warm, true. And then everything made sense. In that backpack, there wasn't just Livia's snack. There was someone else's food. At the end of class, Mariana gathered her courage and sat down next to her. "You share your snack with someone, don't you?" Livia didn't answer with words. She just looked up and made a slight nod. "Yes." Mariana then asked in a whisper, "Do you go hungry at home?" The answer was another negative with her head. "I stop eating here, so they can eat there," Livia said softly. "My brothers." And in that moment, Mariana understood what no one else had seen. The backpack didn't carry shame. It carried sacrifice, love, courage. And from that moment on, everything would start to change. The video continued to spread through the school hallways like a subtle poison, smiling on the outside, cruel on the inside. Caio, proud of the success of his own mockery, walked between the classrooms showing the recording as if it were a trophy. His classmates laughed, patted him on the back, imitated Livia kneeling, creating a grotesque caricature of someone they never cared to really know. "It's going to become a meme," said one of them, laughing. "Poverty snack," whispered others. Livia heard everything. The laughter didn't stop at the videos. It echoed in the hallways, in the looks, in the pointing fingers. And yet, she remained silent. Not out of weakness, but by choice. She had learned early on that certain words, when answered, only gain more strength. But inside her, something was starting to boil. A silent indignation, burning like a fever. Not because of the mockery itself, but because they mocked something they had no right to touch. The dignity with which she shared every crumb with her younger siblings. In the teacher's lounge, the situation began to be discussed. The pedagogical coordinator saw the video and turned pale. "Who posted this?" "It was Caio from 80B, said an employee. "This is bullying. Serious. This could lead to a lawsuit." But before measures could be taken, another version of the video began to circulate. Mariana had downloaded the content but edited it. She cut out the laughter, the insults, and added subtitles. She wasn't embarrassed. She was full of love. Her bread fed 3. And there were still people laughing. She posted it discreetly on social media, and the video exploded. Thousands of views in just a few hours. People were crying in the comments. People were asking who the girl was. Mothers, fathers, teachers from other schools denouncing the culture of mockery and exclusion. The next morning, the principal was called in a hurry. The local press was calling nonstop. The story of the poor girl with the backpack was gaining momentum, and the school was trying to contain a fire that had started with a joke. Meanwhile, Livia walked through the hallways with the same silent steps. But now, the world was starting to pay attention. The morning began with a strange energy in the school. The students who, the day before, laughed loudly and mocked Livia, now whispered among themselves, avoiding looking at her. The video edited by Mariana had changed the narrative, from mockery to emotion. And this change was quick, like a mirror turned on everyone's face. In classroom 80B, the mood was different. For the first time in months, Livia entered and everyone was silent. She walked to her desk without looking to the sides, not with fear, but with determination. Like someone who had already faced worse things outside of there, like someone who has learned to walk among the rubble of dignity, picking up pieces of herself without making a fuss. Mariana gave a slight nod. Livia returned the gesture with a calm look. When the teacher entered the room, she found the group silent, many with their cell phones put away, which was rare. She walked to the table, arranged the papers, and before saying good morning asked, "Does anyone here want to comment on the video that is circulating?" No one answered. "No? Then I will comment." She looked directly at Kaio, who was trying to hide behind his pencil case. "What you did yesterday was not a joke. It was cruel. And you did not make fun of a classmate. You made fun of a story that you did not even try to understand." Clara remained silent, but Mariana clenched her fists. "The school is investigating the case, and I can tell you right now, there will be consequences. But what matters most to me now is that you learn one thing. Everyone here carries a backpack, some with expensive books, others with hidden pains. And what you did was open the wrong backpack with the wrong intention. And what you found there was more noble than many here have ever shown." The room remained silent. Even Julia lowered her head. The teacher then turned to Livia. "Livia, I want to thank you for yesterday, for today, for the strength to keep coming here, for the courage to share the little you have with those who have even less." It was the first moment that Livia's eyes filled with tears, not from shame, but from recognition. The teacher then concluded, "This is the most important class of the week, and it won't be on the report card." The class fell silent, but this time it was a silence of respect. The note was folded, with the name Livia written in blue pen. The teacher received it from the inspector in the middle of class and handed it to the girl discreetly, with a subtle gesture of support. Livia unfolded the paper, read the few words calmly, and took a deep breath. "Please come to the principal's office during the second break." Her heart raced. It wasn't fear. It was the discomfort of knowing that, once again, she would be placed at the center of a story she never asked to be the star of. And this time, the stage was the principal's office. During the second break, with her backpack on her shoulder and her notebook clutched to her chest, Livia walked to the central hallway. Some students whispered, but there was no more laughter. Now the looks were confused and a mix of guilt, curiosity, and respect. At the principal's office door, the atmosphere was different. Absolute silence. She was greeted by the secretary with kindness. Something rare. "The principal will see you soon, my dear," the woman said in a sweet tone that contrasted with her usual distance. Livia nodded and sat down in the waiting chair. A few minutes later, she was called. Principal Regina's office had always been a scary place, but now upon entering, Livia found a more welcoming environment. Regina got up from her chair, walked around the desk, and smiled, not patronizingly, but with sincere admiration. "Livia, you can sit down, and don't worry. You're not here to be questioned. You're here to be heard." Livia sat down, looking into the principal's eyes. She didn't look away. "I watched both videos, the original and the one that circulated later. And I have to tell you, you were the only one who had real courage in this school." The girl kept her expression firm, but her eyes began to burn. "Do you want to tell me what was in that backpack?" Livia nodded, and with a calm voice, without embellishments, she began. "Every day, before coming here, I separate food for myself and my two brothers. They are 4 and 6 years old. Since my mother started working far away, I am the one who takes care of them. Grandma helps, but she has a problem with her leg. The bread I bring is divided into 3 parts. Sometimes I get the smallest one. Other times, I only get the note she writes me." Regina leaned back in her chair, silent, respectful. "You know you had no obligation to share. I know, but hunger doesn't wait, and love doesn't either." The principal closed her eyes for a second, and she understood that there, in front of her, was not just a student. She was a leader, a girl who in silence taught every day what no one had the courage to say out loud. When the principal asked if she could see with her own eyes what was inside Livia's backpack, the girl just nodded. Slowly she removed the worn zipper, and once again revealed the contents that had been a source of laughter a few days ago, now treated with reverence. There were 3 pieces of bread individually wrapped in recycled cloths. One of them, smaller, without margarine. 2 small bags of fruit, one with half an apple, the other with a piece of already browned banana. And finally, 3 small paper napkins folded delicately. One of them had a handwritten phrase, "You are our light, with love, Grandma." The principal felt her throat tighten. She slowly reached out and took one of the cloths. "Do you do this every day?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "Yes. I wake up at 5 to pack their lunch boxes. They stay with Grandma while I come to school. If I eat here, they don't eat there." The sincerity in Livia's voice was so disarming that it seemed to light up the room. There was no drama, no revolt. There was just too much maturity for such a young girl. "And why did you never tell anyone about this?" Livia looked up. "Because no one asked." Silence. The principal stood up, walked around the table, and with a firm gesture placed her hand on Livia's shoulder. "What you do is great. You are an example, and everyone here will know that. The right way, by truth, by dignity." Livia lowered her head, not out of shame, but because that was the first time anyone had seen her as she really was. A poor girl, yes, but with a soul that carried more than a backpack. She carried an entire family with love. That same day, Regina called an extraordinary meeting with the coordinators and teachers. She asked Mariana and Livia to be present, and there, in a small and respectful circle, the truth was told, without spectacle, without exposure, with humanity. And that afternoon, something definitely changed at school. Not because everyone knew what was in the backpack, but because, for the first time, they wanted to know. The meeting called by Principal Regina was short, but unforgettable. It brought together only the teachers, the coordinator, Mariana, and Livia. It was not a hearing. It was not a punishment. It was a space for listening. A rare moment where words did not come from above but sprang from the ground where Livia had knelt days ago, picking up the crumbs of what many called shame, but which was now understood as pure sacrifice. The coordinator asked for silence, and the principal began. "We are faced with a case that unfortunately is not unique, but this story has affected us so deeply that it can no longer be ignored. Today we have not come here to talk about broken rules, but to acknowledge a silent truth that went unnoticed by all of us." Mariana then took the floor. She spoke of the day she saw Livia trembling as she opened her backpack, of the dark banana, of the handwritten napkin, of the way she lowered her eyes but never lowered her dignity. "I saw courage where everyone else saw silence," Mariana said. Her voice choked. Everyone looked at Livia. She had her backpack on her lap, as always. But now she sat with her spine straight, her eyes steady. She took a deep breath and said, "I didn't want anyone to know, because telling hurts. It hurts to have to explain that we stop eating because we love. It hurts to remember that while they were making fun of me, my brothers were at home waiting for that bread with hope." The coordinator wiped her eyes discreetly. One of the teachers held back tears. The whole room seemed to have shrunk, not because of its size, but because of the humility imposed by the moment. "When they laughed at me," Livia continued, "I almost gave up on coming back the next day, but I knew that if I stayed home they wouldn't eat. So I came, and I came with more strength, because my grandmother says that our love needs to go on even when no one sees it." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. The kind of silence that weighs heavily because it carries the truth. The principal then said, From today on, no one will go through this at this school without being seen. You're not just the poor girl from lunch, Livia. You're the girl who taught adults to see the invisible. And at that moment, even without applause, without spotlights, without likes, Livia was heard, truly. And the silence, finally, had a voice. The transformation began slowly, like a light breeze that comes through the crack of a window that's been closed for a long time. After the meeting, Principal Regina decided that this story wouldn't be buried as an isolated case, but used as a symbol of change, as a chance to re-educate sleeping hearts. The following Monday, the school woke up differently. On the entrance wall, where before there were only photos of parties and press releases, a handmade poster appeared. Do you know what's in the backpack of the person sitting next to you? And below, listen before you laugh, respect before you judge. The phrase went viral. It was shared by other schools, teachers, and even NGOs. Many wanted to know who the poor girl with the backpack was. But the principal was clear. Her name will not be used for exposure. She has already carried enough. Now we bear the responsibility of changing. In the classroom, the effects also began to appear. Julia, previously arrogant and mocking, asked to speak with Livia. Nervous, with her eyes swollen from unresolved crying, she said, "I didn't know. I'm really sorry." Livia, as always, responded in a few words. "Now you know." And that changes everything. Kaio was also called to the principal's office. He was suspended for 3 days and forced to attend lectures on bullying and empathy. When he returned, he was quieter. He walked past Livia with respect, not out of fear, but because he understood the weight of what he didn't see. But the biggest change wasn't in the people to blame. It was in the culture. The school created the Open Backpack Project, an initiative where, once a week, students were invited to share personal stories of overcoming challenges and silent victories. It wasn't mandatory, but in the first few weeks, the line to tell stories was long. Students who had never noticed each other started greeting each other. Teachers started looking each other in the eye more. Even the inspector, who had barely spoken before, praised the project and started calling the students by name. And in the midst of all this, Livia remained as always, discreet. She sat in the corner. She studied with dedication, but something in her had changed. Now she was seen, and more than that, she was an inspiration, without ever shouting, without ever asking for a stage, just being who she was, a poor girl with the soul of a giant. On Wednesday of the following week, a black car with the logo of the TV station parked in front of the school. The reporter, well-dressed and accompanied by a cameraman, was greeted with curiosity by the students who soon gathered near the gate. They were there to interview the girl in the video, the so-called poor girl from the lunch. The principal, Regina, received them cordially but firmly. "We understand the media's interest, but Livia's story is not a product. She has already been exposed too much. We don't need to turn her into a spectacle. She is a student, not a case, and her protection is a priority." The reporter insisted, "But Brazil needs to know this story. It is inspiring. So many people are suffering. She represents thousands." Regina crossed her arms. "And precisely for that reason, we are not going to turn it into a headline. We are going to turn it into action." Livia, who was watching from afar through the window of the office, heard the conversation. She felt a mixture of relief and fear. Relief at not being forced to speak. Fear that the world would forget. But at that very moment she heard the principal conclude, "If you want to talk about her, talk about all the Livias out there. Talk about those who share the little they have, even though they are ignored. But leave the person alone. She is still just a girl, and she needs to continue to be one." The TV crew left without recording. Mariana, who had watched everything next to Livia, asked, "Would you have the courage to tell everyone?" Livia answered quietly, "It's not courage. It's just that my story is not just mine. But sometimes, silence also protects." At the end of that day, while everyone was talking about the press visit, something simple and powerful happened. On the door of the girls' bathroom, someone stuck a note. "Not all heroes wear capes. Some just carry heavy backpacks." Livia read it and smiled. At that school, her silence had made more noise than any interview ever would. The following week, as the school settled into its new climate of listening more and judging less, something simple caught Mariana's attention. It was a notebook, an old notebook with a navy blue cover, already crumpled, with pages marked by small, well-drawn letters. She found it forgotten on the bench near the library, and when she opened the back cover, she read in firm handwriting, Livia Azevedo, 80B. If you find it, please return it. It's where I plant my seeds. Curious, Mariana leafed through it carefully, and there it was, Livia's soul in words. It wasn't a diary with emotional outbursts, but a field of ideas, sketches of stories, short, inspiring phrases, loose thoughts that together formed a map of the mind of someone who, despite everything, still believed in people. I didn't eat today, but my brothers slept with full bellies. That's a victory. I wanted to turn dry bread into a warm smile. Sometimes I can. One day my backpack will carry books and not just food. Mariana read with tears in her eyes. She already admired Livia, but now she understood that this girl was not just a survivor. She was a seed of a more beautiful future. Livia wrote as if she were sowing hope in her own silence. It was her way of staying alive inside, even when the world wanted her to be invisible. In Portuguese class, the teacher asked the students to write an essay about someone who inspired them. Mariana wrote about the girl with the backpack without mentioning names, but at the end of the text, she left a sentence. She is poor, yes, but with a giant spirit. And when she writes, the world listens, even if in silence. The teacher read aloud. The class in silence listened. Livia, sitting in the corner, recognized every word, but she said nothing. She just smiled with her eyes. During recess, Mariana gave the notebook back. Sorry, I read it by accident, but you write very well. It's okay, Livia replied. It's the only place where I can truly listen to myself. And that day, when she returned home, Livia wrote another page. Today I planted another seed. I still don't know if it will grow into a tree, but I know it will grow. On Friday morning, while the students were still arriving and the school was slowly waking up to the hurried footsteps in the hallway, Livia was surprised by a brown envelope left on top of her desk. It had her name written in pen and an official seal from the Department of Education stuck in the upper corner. For a second, she thought it was some kind of charge, or perhaps a belated formal warning. But when she opened it, her eyes froze on the words at the top. Essay contest. Young Voices of Hope. Theme. The world I carry in my backpack. Along with the invitation was a note signed by the Portuguese teacher. Livia, I read excerpts from your notebook, and I couldn't ignore the talent, sensitivity, and depth of what you write. You carry more than words. You carry the world. I thought this contest would be the perfect chance to show the world what we already know here. You have a lot to say. Livia's heart raced. This was new, an opportunity, a space where her voice, previously stifled, could be read, perhaps heard, without having to shout. But along with the excitement came the old fear. What if they laugh again? What if she wasn't good enough? That afternoon, when she showed the envelope to her grandmother, she received a simple and accurate answer. My daughter, you already write with your heart. Now all that's left is to let the world peek through a crack. With timid encouragement, Livia decided to participate. She chose one of the most striking texts from her notebook and began to adapt it. She told the story of the backpack, not as a denunciation, but as a revelation that sometimes what seems small, ugly, or unimportant carries silent beauty. In my backpack, yes, there is bread, but there is also poetry. There is love wrapped in a napkin. There is silence that nourishes. Days later, with trembling hands, Livia handed in her essay to her teacher, who smiled with tears in her eyes. This is what the world needs, your truth. And for the first time, the girl who was afraid to speak was chosen to represent an entire school. In the school library, where silence was always the rule and books slept, waiting for attentive readers, Livia sat alone, with the final page of her essay in front of her. It was her last chance to say what needed to be said, not to win the contest, but to free herself once and for all from the invisible weight she had always carried. She took a deep breath, twirled the pencil between her fingers, and then wrote, If one day you laugh at a torn backpack, try to imagine what it carries. Sometimes it's just a snack. Sometimes it's the remains of a dream. Sometimes it's all the person has. I'm the poor girl at the lunch table, and I carry more than bread. I carry the love of my family, the hunger that teaches me to share, and the hope that doesn't fit in a lunchbox. I didn't want applause. I just wanted you to one day look at me the way you look at books, or with respect, because inside, I'm also made of stories." She finished the sentence with her heart pounding and her eyes brimming with tears. There was no more fear. That last page wasn't just the end of a text. It was the beginning of a new identity. On the day of the official delivery, the principal and the teacher accompanied Livia to the regional headquarters of the Department of Education. She was the only student from the school to be selected to represent the institution. Sitting among dozens of students, all well-dressed, with new backpacks and firm voices, Livia maintained her composure. Her uniform was clean, but worn. Her sneakers were worn. Still, no one there had the firmness that she carried in her eyes. When the chosen excerpts were read publicly, one of the judges asked for silence and read an excerpt aloud. "Sometimes the bread is dry, but the soul is moist with love." The people in the room looked at each other. Some discreetly wiped their eyes. Others looked in the pamphlet to find out who had written those words. But Livia remained quiet, as always, until the principal approached, put her hand on her shoulder and whispered, "They don't know it yet, but they are hearing the sound of your silence." And that day, even without a microphone, without a spotlight, the poor girl at the lunch table became the writer who made everyone shut up, so they could finally feel. The news was published discreetly in the city newspaper. Public school student moves with essay on overcoming and empathy. They didn't mention her name. It wasn't even necessary. Those who lived the story knew who they were talking about, and those who just read it felt that those words had soul, and that they came from someone who learned to be a giant without ever stepping onto a stage. At school, the impact was not just momentary. The Open Backpack Project became a reference in other institutions. Livia began to be heard in conversation circles, invited to help new students, and even led writing workshops for elementary school children. But she was never fooled by the praise. She never wanted the spotlight. He kept arriving early with the same backpack. He kept offering her his snack, still divided into 3 parts. And he kept writing, with increasing clarity, as if translating the invisible with his own words. One gray afternoon, Mariana found a loose sheet of paper on the table in the reading room. It was another piece of Livia's notebook, unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakable. "I didn't need to scream to be heard. I didn't need to win to be strong. Sometimes all we have is an old backpack, a piece of bread, and a dream that no one sees. But if the world laughs at your pain, write with it, because words are like seeds. They grow in silence, and one day someone will eat what you planted." When Mariana showed it to the teacher, she asked the principal for permission, and that text was printed on a wooden plaque and placed at the entrance to the school. Now, everyone who entered knew there was a sacred story within those walls. It wasn't about misery. It was about greatness. It wasn't about pity. It was about strength. It wasn't about a poor girl. It was about a soul that silently rewrote what everyone thought they knew about courage. Livia never went on stage, but the whole show changed because of her, and the backpack, once seen as a symbol of shame, became a symbol of love, resistance, and dignity.